Joining us now, our good friend from Husker 24/7, Mike Schaefer. Schaefer, what's going on, buddy?
How we doing, guys?
Oh, we're just well, I'm doing good. Andrew's having a bit of a rough morning,
Yeah,
but
it's been a long morning for me, Schaefer. We had a
What's
little.
going on, Andrew? Tell us. We're here to help.
I know you're like my therapist. I feel like I'm laying on the couch right now. No, I got into a little car accident this morning. I got hit from behind.
Yeah, that's never a fun experience. Was it a delivery driver?
It was
service
not.
vehicle, a police officer?
It was not. Nope. No, it was your regular average Joe that hit me from behind. Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that. Hopefully the damage isn't terrible.
You know, surprisingly, I was telling everybody the damage on my car for as fast as I got hit at is not bad. Like, my car's drivable. It's like a cage fighter, and then his car going 45, 50 miles an hour, totally and completely totaled. So there we go. Yeah, hate to hear that, hate to see that, but we're here, we're alive, we're healthy. He's healthy, which is great too, and I'm ready to talk about Nebraska football because Ravi got to do it for the first hour and a half, and I was really mad because yesterday was like the day to come in and be like, there's a lot of juice here. We can break some of this down. And
sorry.
No. Go ahead.
I was going to say, not to make light of your accident there, but you had a great segue opportunity. And speaking of car crashes, the Big Ten West.
There you go. Well, I used that with one of our great sponsors on the show already. So
all right. Well, that's good.
The good segues. But Shay,
you're not wrong. The Big Ten West. Yeah. I typically call it a dumpster fire more than a car crash, but because I think you have to incorporate the smell of the Big Ten West.
Sure.
The analogy. But no, so we're sitting here. We got 5 and 5 teams in the Big Ten West. Nebraska, one of those, still has an opportunity to win the Big Ten West. I don't even know if I want that to happen, as I mentioned earlier, or in previous shows. But as you kind of come off of the disappointing last 2 games from Nebraska, I guess where are you at in terms of your belief in their ability to get bowl eligible in one of these last 2 games?
Yeah, I mean, obviously you'd prefer that they just get it done so you don't have to white knuckle this, finish, but that's just not how things go with Nebraska. It really hasn't changed a ton beyond just the fact there's 2 less opportunities. I think the hard part is that the same team that has lost these 2 games here at the beginning of November, it was pretty much the same team that won the 3 games in October. The only real difference is there's just been a slight deviation with the defense against Michigan State, and Nebraska's not hitting on a big pass play down the field in either of Michigan State or Maryland. I mean, they just haven't. That was part of the deal, right? Like, their offense has to contribute a couple big plays a game, and that's where they're going to get some of this stuff from. It's hard for them to just drive down the field. It's hard for them not to turn the ball over. So they need to hit on a couple of those big plays. And they didn't have a 40-yard pass play in either of the Michigan State or Maryland game, but I think they did in the 3 games previous. Actually, it might be 4 or 5 games previous. Like, the big pass has been part of the offense. And I know that everybody wants Nebraska to just run the ball 100% of the time. But in some of these defenses they're facing, they have to be able to take some of these shots and need to be able to hit on 1 or 2 of them. And that is going to make things. It's going to be true against Wisconsin and Iowa. And I don't know that they're in a better position to do it. But to me, that feels like the biggest contrast in what we've seen. Because they were turning the ball over against Northwestern and Purdue. They had rough moments at times defensively in some of those games. But the big thing is they just have not hit on the 1 or 2 pass plays that one, either sets up a score or scores itself. I mean, getting points is really hard for this team right now.
Schaefer, I just got just brought up this point in the last segment of one of the more interesting nuggets of Rule's presser was when he said we don't throw these interceptions in practice like we do in games. And then there was another point that he had later on that was like, trust your training. You don't want to live in fear. When speaking about the quarterback position here, my question is the training, does it work? Is it right? Because nothing looks right about the quarterback position right now, and it also looks like they're playing in fear.
Yeah, I mean, when it looks bad, it's going to look really bad. I just think that's just sort of how it is. It's hard for me to say what the training is and why it isn't going well for them. I mean, it's also 3 games ago, you would have said probably, obviously, there's been some development for Heinrich Harburg. So it doesn't work, it's not an all or nothing. It's incremental. I think the hardest part for everyone, myself included, is even if you thought Jeff Sims was going to be uneven, you never would have expected it to be this bad. And there's a couple of things on Saturday again where it's like, I don't think it's training for him to just fall off his back foot and lob a ball into the end zone.
Mhm.
I don't think it's training for him to just completely lose a football when a Maryland player gets one finger on it, as what happened at the beginning of the fourth quarter. So you're not in practice, you're certainly not anticipating Jeff Sims is just going to turn the ball over on back-to-back plays in the fourth quarter where they're really almost unforced. Like that's part of the hard part with it. A lot of their mistakes feel unforced more often than not.
Yeah, Schaefer, I'm wondering, with the trust, the training, and all that kind of stuff, do you think it would be beneficial if Nebraska looked into having an exclusive quarterback coach next year rather than pairing that position with Marcus Satterfield? Because as we kind of heard from Coach Rule, it doesn't sound like anyone on the coaching staff is going anywhere. So I don't think that's something really worth spending a ton of time on. But I do wonder how much it would be helpful to have somebody whose dedicated job it is to help teach these quarterbacks, especially when they are in such a crucial developmental stage.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that it's the worst thing in the world. And the hard part is I don't know what sort of help Marcus Satterfield can or can't provide. Like I'm not there in those meetings. I'm not there watching him go through drills. I don't really know the level of coach that he is for quarterback play. I know they have analysts. I know they have other guys to help out. So it's not like there's a lack of people talking to him. But I don't know what his background is, and it is telling that they hired him initially to coach a different position than quarterback. That wasn't the plan when Matt Rule got here. So with the tight end job being open, it does allow for the idea of Marcus Satterfield switching over to tight ends in addition to his offensive coordinator role. And then you do have an opening on your staff already, unless they're just going to go ahead and give that job to Josh Martin, the interim coach. So I'm not sure that that's what they're going to do, but if you're going to make a move, you do have an opening and you can naturally move Satterfield over to working with the tight ends. And he's done that at other stops. So it's not like that's not a particularly difficult move, I think, for Satterfield.
Shay, for almost 2 full games this season, this team was able to make it without being penalized. Think there will ever come a day they won't have a turnover?
Well, sure. I mean, there's a chance, like they're just like everyone else. They're going to line it up and hope that the yellow flags don't fly. And they're going to hope that the ball stays with their team and not the other team. And one of these days it will, and then it's going to be a glorious party on 72nd and Dodge. People hanging from the light posts, and it'll be incredible in Omaha. The scene is going to be undescribable. But it is a real challenge for them because they just, man, like I said with the Jeff Simpsons, and here's the other thing. Every one of those interceptions, they were thrown roughly into double coverage. I mean, not so much the Chubba Purdy one. I don't really know where that was thrown in general. But they weren't open passes. They were just forced bad decisions. And I don't know that that's just going to disappear anytime soon. And so you're going to have to figure out as you go through this week, which quarterback's bad decisions you can live with while also trying to maximize your offense, because you're going to have to score points. Like, you're not going to win this game 9-6 on Saturday, or at least I don't think you're going to win the game 9-6 on Saturday. So it's going to be that is a really difficult decision this week. I do not envy Matt Rule for having to choose between 3 options that don't exactly excite you. Like, this is it's tough. definitely tough.
All right, Shafe, so we're going to put you in that chair since it sounds like a question you don't really want to answer. We're going to make you.
Sure.
If you're if you're the guy making the decision, you've got Heinrich Harburg, who with a high ankle sprain and his skill set, I'm not sure that's a guy you want to put out there. You've got a healthy Jeff Sims, which I just don't think you want to put out there based on what he's done this year. And then you've got a somewhere in the middle Chubba Purdy, who doesn't have a ton of experience, but is relatively healthy, a little banged up. I mean, you're parsing through the information. Obviously, we're not seeing him at practice. Where do you go on Saturday?
Well, what I think is going to happen is multiple quarterbacks are going to end up playing on Saturday. But I would, and I am as surprised as anyone that I am saying this. I would probably end up going with Jeff Sims here. I just would probably prefer his experience. I don't. One, all full disclosure, I was already fairly skeptical of Chubba Purdy. The news of his groin injury still being an issue bothers me. I watched him throw his 47 passes in 2022. Those bothered me. The interception on Saturday bothered me. The fact that you hear after the game he pulled the play on first down bothered me. Like, I just, and I get if you go with him because he's relatively the one that has failed the least, which is where the groundswell of support comes from, which is never a place you really want to be, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're the guy because you failed the least of the other people. But I would go Jeff Sims, and I understand that is inviting 2 turnovers a game. But I thought the offense looked at times smoother than it had in a while when Sims was in there. The unfortunate thing is he could make some tight, good passes like he did to Billy Kemp earlier in that game. He hit Jalen Lloyd down the field. Like, I would rather die going in with Jeff Sims and thinking there's a chance for some big play potential than experiencing Chubba Purdy again. I don't remember how many drives he had in 2022. You had another one this year. I think he's led 1 touchdown in somewhere around 15 drives. Like, that's just not that's not a recipe for success. And it's not really something I want to see either.
Shay, from a play calling point of view, obviously we hear all the time that the plays work. There's guys that are open. It's just the execution level just isn't there. How important do you think it is for this coaching staff to kind of eat some of that and sort of dumb down the play calls maybe, or make them like a little more basic for these quarterbacks so that, instead of doing something so extravagant, it may not be like the most unique thing out there, but at least it's something that works.
It's really hard though, because at some point, like, I don't know how much more simplified it can be. At some point, kind of like Matt Rule said, these guys have to be able to see it and make plays. Like, there were plays to be made for Heinrich Harburg in the Michigan State game, and he did not see them. I don't think it was a product of the offense is too complicated. I think it's a product of they don't process information fast enough. And I don't know how you could necessarily speed that up, because I don't think Nebraska is running extremely difficult concepts. Like, I don't look at what they're doing on offense as very, very difficult. There is some window dressing in there. There's some motion to try to figure out what's going on defensively. They're trying to get numbers to one side or the other, and the zone read, you always have to be able to read your keys and all of those things. But for the most part, the passing concepts aren't, I don't think they're, revolutionary. And so a lot of it is just being able to work through your progressions. And I just don't know that they've had a quarterback between Sims or Harburg that has shown any real skill at that. And that
Do that, but it feels like they haven't really done that at all. Does that really surprise you much?
A little bit. It makes me wonder if they don't really have that much confidence in their ability to throw on the run,
Mm.
that kind of thing, because it seems like something you would do with a Jeff Sims or a Heinrich Harburg for that matter, like that sprint rollout play that kind of comes to mind. Those sorts of things. We haven't seen them. We see Heinrich Harburg drift a lot to the right sideline, but it's not, I think, designed to do that. So it we talked about that a couple weeks ago, like you said, and I'm totally fine with the idea in principle. It just makes me wonder if they haven't been able to execute it a lot during the year. I also, there's just some things that it feels like they find in one game and then just go away from a little bit. I would like to see a few more of those short passes out of the backfield to Josh Fleeks, just to kind of let him get to work against the linebackers. If you can make a guy miss. They had some nice goal line plays to Fleeks a few weeks ago. I thought that could have been, more helpful for them this past game when you get in close like that. But it's just hard to say. I mean, I don't know. I don't know that there's a lot that they can do to really make it easier. They just need guys to start making plays. And at times that happened in October, and it's just not right now in November.
Well, Schaefer, okay, let's turn our attention to Wisconsin now before, or at least as this interview winds down, because they seem to be in no better place than Nebraska today. Obviously, each team has their strengths, they have their weaknesses. Who's in a better state, though, program-wise today in your mind? Does Nebraska still have a leg up in the culture department despite the on-field struggles?
I think so. And partly because the way that the Fickle thing went down, I think the thought that it was going to be more of an not in-house, but just the thought that it was going to be a Wisconsin guy, and then it wasn't, and then they're sort of changing the ethos of Wisconsin with the offense a little bit. I think that's harder to buy from the outside walls than maybe what Matt Rule has done, but then you can also flip it like this. And if there are any Wisconsin fans listening, I apologize, but they don't care that much relative to what Nebraska fans truly care about. So then it's also like, any blowback Fickle gets, it's probably actually less than the blowback that Matt Rule received for not calling a run on 3rd and 7 or 3rd and goal there. So it's, in terms of measurement, I think people care significantly more about Nebraska football than they do about Wisconsin football. So I think because of that, it's just hard to say. But I personally, I would feel better as a Nebraska fan than a Wisconsin fan at the moment. Mostly because I think what Matt Rule is attempting to do while working through all of these injuries is visible in that defense. What's happening over at Wisconsin, it's a lot harder to sell that there was progress being made this year versus what we've seen at Nebraska.
Shafe, how much of that has to do with, bringing in a Tanner Mordecai, who's a 6-year one and done QB, and kind of the vibe that gives that you're looking to win right away. And then when it doesn't happen, you kind of sit there and say, okay, what now?
Yeah, I don't think it's all that dissimilar, for them in terms of what Matt Rule brought over with Jeff Sims, and you're trying to institute this offense, and it clearly doesn't work. I mean, Wisconsin's trying to institute Phil Longo's offense. They went and got Tanner Mordecai because they didn't feel like there was anybody on the roster that could run it the way they wanted to, and then it doesn't look good. That just sort of feels like one of your first big decisions completely falls on its face. I mean, for Matt Rule, one of his first big decisions was to go out and get Jeff Sims. And then, a lot of people extrapolate that means you push Casey Thompson out the door. And regardless of that entire conversation, it hasn't worked. So I think there is a lot of similarity there. And it doesn't mean the Phil Longo offense can't work. It just means that Wisconsin was going to need a lot more than one offseason and a couple transfer portal additions. I think they have issues with wide receiver. I don't think their offensive line is nearly as good as it is. Tanner Mordecai is merely fine, and they need it better than that. And I don't know what happened with Braylon Allen. I don't know if it's a product of the offensive line, but they just don't seem as threatening on offense. And they haven't. And I watched a lot of them early in the season and felt like they were particularly overrated at that time. And it's really kind of the bottom has fallen out. But Nebraska has to be in position to take advantage of that. And I don't know that the three of us sitting here today feels like they really are as we head into Saturday.
Shave quickly here, minute and a half to go. Let's try to find something positive to end on here. If you had to find a bright spot, from last weekend, and I know Emmett Johnson's the easy answer, but could I convince you to start with the defensive line?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think the defensive line's been a bright spot for the entire year. They've been something I was excited about coming into the year, and they've been good. And so then I get to gloat about that a little bit. So it's definitely a bright spot to me. I want to throw another offensive piece. I wrote about this yesterday real quickly. I'm excited about what Jalen Lloyd is getting out of this year. I thought that was an important 25-yard catch down the field. I think we're seeing him develop more into being a wide receiver and not just a gadget player, which is what I thought he might be at Nebraska. And that's exciting. I mean, it's one catch, right? He only has 4 this year, but he's got 4 catches down the field. He can continue to develop as a big play threat, get better as a wide receiver. I mean, that's the sort of development that we're not going to be able to see as much during the season, but could pay big dividends next year.
Big play threat. That's the key word there, because how has Nebraska won games this year? By somebody that made a big play.
Schaefer, we appreciate you as always. We'll talk to you again next week.
All right, guys. Have a good one. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks, Schaefer.
That's Mike Schaefer from Husker 24/7. Coming up next, we're going to talk to Jim Polzine a little bit more about Wisconsin football, how things stand up there. He's from the Wisconsin State Journal as we wrap up the show here on Hurrdat Sports Radio.